Hi, this is Miss Evelyn, and welcome to Visions for a Child's Heart. We have with us today Ms. Jacqueline Brighouse.
Brighouse.
Brighouse! So welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Is it okay if I say Jackie?
Yes.
Okay, Jackie. Actually, Jackie and I have a different relationship that we hopefully will come up during the process. But I know that you were adopted at what age?
I believe I was 11.
11.
Mhm.
So I think you were 12 when I first met you.
Yeah.
Okay. But prior to that, you were in the foster care
Mhm.
system.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you entered the foster care system?
At birth.
At birth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, and I know, I'll start to, do you know the circumstances?
Yeah,
But I know you know more. We'll tell the audience why you know so much at this point. But what do you recall, other than what you were told? Um,
What was like my first memory of knowing that I was a foster child?
yeah.
I would have to say I was around 4 or 5 years old, and I had a social worker named Mildred Mall, and she drove a yellow bug, and I lived in Oakland at the time, and I remember her driving the yellow bug to my apartment and
Yellow.
and
Just to you, Mildred.
and taking me to the park. And she took me to the park, and she told me, uh, just flat out, I just wanted to tell you that you're a foster child. You're supposed to be adopted, but things aren't working out, and you're gonna be moved. But that was like the first time I knew, like, what, huh? From birth to 4 years old, this was my mom, this was my dad. I had no idea that I was in foster care, that I was supposed to be adopted. This is all I knew because they had me from like I was 4 months.
Wow.
So, and I just went through, like, I didn't understand what was going on. I thought, I was bad, that's why I have to leave, and just a lot of emotional things, after that. But that was my first memory of understanding or beginning to understand what being a foster child or being adopted meant.
Wow. And I'm sure even those words, what is a foster child? Because
Yeah.
say you're a foster child, and you're supposed to say, okay, what's that?
Yeah, right.
Wow. So you moved shortly after that?
The next day,
Ooh.
all my things are packed in trash bags, black trash bags.
I hate that.
And I was moved to San Francisco. I moved to 3rd and Oakdale in San Francisco. And there was a family there with a mother and a father and 2 older brothers in the beginning. And then the more kids came later. The parents split up later. But I stayed there for about 6 months, and went through the therapy at the Children's Hospital. And all of a sudden, Mildred Mall shows up again and tells me, your mom wants you back. And so there goes my things packed in a trash bag again, and then I was back at, who I knew to be my mom. And 6 months later after that, she got pregnant, and all of a sudden my mom didn't want me anymore. And then so there goes the trash bags again, and I was back at that home.
You were back to the same
in San Francisco. And that was all within like a year.
Bless your heart. And you were 5
Five,
years old?
yeah. I was in kindergarten, 1st grade. I was going to George Washington Carver Elementary.
So you remained in foster care until you were
11.
11,
Yeah,
okay.
11. After I left, I believe the mother in the San Francisco home was diagnosed with cancer, and so she couldn't take care of us really anymore. And so from there, I moved to a home in Oakland Hills.
Okay.
And so that was a biracial family. And so that was different. And my foster mom was a nurse, and my foster dad was a psychiatrist.
Oh.
Yeah. But now that I look back at it, he didn't seem like a very good one.
Okay. He was confused himself,
Yeah.
probably.
But I lived there for probably 8 months, 8, 9 months.
Okay. Out of curiosity, which parent was African American?
The mother was
Okay.
African American.
Okay, so you had that same gender association.
Yeah, and they had a daughter.
Okay.
At that time, she was like 3 or 4.
Okay.
So yeah, I did 2nd grade there and a little bit of 3rd grade there. Well, no, I think 1st and 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah, there. At Grass Valley Elementary.
Okay.
And so they from the gate, they had made it clear. I had got a new social worker, Karen Fields, by that point. And from the gate, they made it very clear that they weren't interested in adopting. They were just, they did long-term foster care.
Okay.
So the social worker that was working with me at that time was like really, her number one priority was to get me adopted.
Okay.
So she was, looking for families, and I never knew that though.
Okay.
So I would go to these visits to these homes like on the weekend, and I was thinking that it was like, oh, it was just so that my mom and dad could have a break, but really that was like
a pre-placement
yeah, and I had no idea, So then you would have these conversations of, oh, how do you like this person, or do you like them, and it's like, yeah, they're fun, but really the question, really was, do you want that person? Yeah, really, but that wasn't the question they were asking, And so from one of the pre-placements, they placed me there, and it was a single mom, and she had a daughter that was maybe about a year younger than me, and it was in Pittsburgh. And within 6-7 months, I was out of there. It just, to me, I actually had called my social worker and said I wanted to leave, because to me it seemed like I was there to be a playmate to her daughter,
and not to be nurtured and cared for.
Right. So, and kids pick up on that, and I felt like I picked up on that, and I didn't want to be there. And I said I want to be an only child. I remember telling.
Really?
Yeah, I remember telling Kayron, I just want to be an only child, and they thought it was because they thought I was gonna get more toys and things like that. But it's just like, I just want to be an only child. And
let me ask you this, because I'm sure that there are some people, some of their motivation for adopting is they have one child and they want another child. What was it that caused your greatest discomfort there, that made you feel like you were there just to be a playmate?
I never felt part of the family.
Okay.
And the little girl, it was like a weird, like, she would do things like try to blackmail me, and kind of like the spreading of the rumors at school, she's just a foster kid, and but then in front of her mom, she was so like, prim and I just never ever felt
any connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a good place to spend the night over on the weekends or whatever. But as far as this is going to be my mom for the rest of my life, and it just wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by now you're about 8, 9?
8. I'm
okay.
8. Yeah. Okay. And so my sister said, okay, I'll do some looking. And I remember she visited me at my school, and if she tells the story, she'll say I came skipping with these pigtails, to the office, and she had a woman with her, and the woman's name was Joyce Reynolds. And so she, introduced me. Oh, this is my friend Joyce, and I said, oh, hello, nice to meet you. And we just talked for a little while, and then I went back to my class. She just wanted to see how things were going. And I guess when I went back to my class, I got in the car, and Kayron looked at Joyce, and you said, I need you to take this little girl for 60 days. And Joyce was like, what? I'm old. That's what she said. I'm almost 50 years old. I don't know what to do with no kid,
58 old.
Yeah. And she goes, look, I guess the program that was in Children's Home Society was shutting down their foster care portion here in the Bay Area, and so they were planning on moving me to LA. And so Karen was like, look, if I could take her myself, I would, but just 60 days. 60 days. And she was like, Karen, all I have is like a mattress on the floor. She's like, I don't even have, that's all she needs. And so she said, okay. And so black trash bags again. And I remember pulling up to her house, and she had her friend there, like best friend from childhood. She needed some moral support. And I remember going into the house and everything, and she making me feel comfortable, and this is my new home. And the first night I was there, we went grocery shopping, and that was like the first time that I actually remembered being a part of the process of going grocery shopping, where you sit down and you make a list and say, okay, what do you like to eat? And I didn't know what I liked to eat. I didn't know. I really didn't know. I just ate what was there.
What was given to you.
Right. And so we went to Rayleigh's in Benicia. I remember the Rayleigh's. And we went there, and she said I suckered her because she had like a $400 grocery bill. I was going up every aisle.
I want
this, you know, all the cool stuff that I see in school. You know,
and on television.
Lunchables, that was the big one.
Okay.
It was when Lunchables first came out. And I remember she saying, you know, talking to her friend, like, Shirley, we can make this. How are we paying? At that time when Lunchables came out, they were $4, you know.
Couldn't get them at the grocery outlet.
Yeah. So, and Lucky Charms. I mean, I had everything in there. And she always points one thing out. She was down at one end of the aisle, and I was down at the other end of the aisle, and I just said, "Hey, Mom!" And she...
Who's she talking to?
Yeah, and my Aunt Shirley, she goes, "I think she's talking to you, Joy. She's talking to you." She's talking to me. Yeah, that girl's calling you Mama.
Oh.
And that was the first day I had met her. And I said, "Can I have this?" You know, and she's like, "Okay." And then we went to Burger King. But that was our first day together.
Wow.
And so 6 months turned into, how old am I now? So 6 months turned into 14 years that she's been in my life.
Okay.
So to keep going with that, going to school, she enrolled me in school right up the street from the house, and I had a teacher there who had a friend named Valerie Russell, and I guess she felt as though she was old, so her main, Joyce's main goal, once again, was to get me adopted. I just need to get her adopted. But she needs someone young, you know, full of life, full of energy. And so, you know, she was telling my teacher this, and my teacher, you know, the way she was like, "Oh, really?" She goes, "I have the perfect person, you know." And it was once again the whole, you know, this is Auntie Val, and I spent weekends with her, and we did things, and she was like the coolest aunt ever, you know. I remember she took me to the Nutcracker. We did all kinds of things, tried different food together, listened to different, I think I was the only 9-year-old listening to Winona Judd, you know, but.
The only African-American 9-year-old listening.
Yeah. Winona Judd and Bonnie Raitt and Tracy Chapman. Yeah, and still to this day, I love, you know, those artists. And she was Auntie Val. And then maybe I want to say a year into it, it was brought to my attention that, you know, she wanted to adopt me. And it was like, but during all of this, I had developed such a strong bond with Joyce. She used to tell me, I mean, it was literally when I got to her, I had missed so many years of development, even down to basic hygiene on how to take care of yourself. She had to start from scratch with me like I was maybe 4 years old on how to brush your teeth, how do you wash your body. And I'm 9 years old. Use deodorant. This is what you do. You know, this is how you take care of yourself. But
she taught you. She didn't yell at you and accuse you for not knowing because it wasn't your fault.
Yeah. She taught. I had a list in my bathroom. These are, you know, the things.
And I just want to stop and say for a minute, as a therapist that works with foster families and some adoptive families who are frustrated when children come to you and you say, they don't know anything. It is not their fault. Just go back and retrace the steps as if you're starting with them from the very beginning, because all of that, you talk about the development emotionally, maybe not physically, and the sad part is that physically we develop quicker than we do mentally, emotionally, and just the learning process. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because that's a real big one, trying to get foster parents to go back and say, okay, just you know, but they're too big for that, and that just hurts me.
Yeah, and that's what she had to do, and she had to instill in me. She used to say to me all the time, "I got your back. I've got your back," and she used to tell me, "There is nothing wrong with you." I knew she, you know, that's what she really felt. And so within that year, you know, we have bonded so much, and I had so much respect for her. And then here was this other woman
that you liked,
who I liked, and but it was like, what do I do? And so there was a point where I said, okay, yeah, and then I had changed my mind, and then I changed my mind again, and so.
Here you go from not having any family to having too many to choose from.
Yeah, and so I ended up, you know, being adopted by, you know, this other woman, Valerie Russell, and you know, experiencing, you know, it was a different life. It was very different than what I had experienced with Joyce. She was just a different person. And we just really didn't click all that well outside of Auntie Val and niece, the Auntie Val and niece relationship. The mother-daughter relationship was really hard, and I really believe that it had a lot to do with just when I became adopted and just beginning to build that mother-daughter relationship. She took in a little boy, my little brother Dominic, and he had so many issues just with his background, so many emotional issues, and it was just a house full of just, I mean, it was stressful, it was chaotic, it was just.
And you were still trying to work out your own stuff, and then trying to be a big sister.
And it was just too much. It was too much, and I acted out in school. I ran away from home. You know, I became sexually active. I became pregnant at 14. I mean, I was crying out for help, and it seemed like no one really was listening. I remember actually sitting down with sitting down with the people who had placed me and telling them I need help. I don't want to live here anymore. There's things going on, and I need help. And they kind of just looked at me and was like, "There's nothing we can, nothing we can do. You're adopted now." And so I really wanted to be moved.
Now, how long did things go well for you in the home?
I would say a year. I would say the first year was, really good. It was definitely that mommy and me time and doing things and even volunteering with your organization. And I remember doing anger management with you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Dude, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was really good that first year. And I went away to basketball camp. And then when I got back, I had a little brother.
Oh, so you were gone when Dominic came?
Yeah, I was gone.
I wasn't aware
I got
of
a
that.
phone call. I called home, and I hear this little kid screaming in the background. And, and she's like, "You have a little brother." And I came home, and he was there.
I wasn't aware of that because your mom and I were friends.
Yeah.
But I know you had been talking about the baby, the baby brother,
boy.
because everybody was preparing for our baby boy.
Yeah.
But I wasn't aware that happened.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was like an emergency phone call. Something emergency had happened in the home that he was living in, and I guess she got a call from the people who placed me with her and said, "There's a little boy and he needs a home. Can you take him?" And she said yes.
Okay.
And there he was.
And what's amazing, and hopefully I can come up with a picture. I have a picture of the two of you guys together, I believe, and you really look like you could be biological siblings.
We do. Yeah,
right.
we do.
And unfortunately, we're not going to have enough time to cover everything because I wanted to look at the difficulties you had from both the perspective, from a clinical perspective, as well as being a family friend, because I always considered you my niece. And I remember once that I came over, you confided in me what was going on, and I really understood, what you were saying, but I felt powerless to do anything because that was my sis. But at the same time, I tried to do my role in talking with her, but then our connection didn't stick because you were all over.
I was gone.
You were everywhere, and I really wanted to reach out, but I just, said prayers. But it also reminded me of the difficulties I'd had with my son because you were about the same age and those same things were going on. So it was hard for me to watch it, but I knew that the dynamics were slightly different.
Right.
I could see part of what was going on, and it was really hard for me.
Right.
It was really hard for me, but I know that just through prayer, God, because you were always very bright, you were always very clear about what you wanted, and it would crack me up because you looked at me, you said, "Now does that make sense?" And I was sitting there like, okay, I can't just say, "No, that don't make no sense at all," and I said, "Well,"
right.
And I tried to be, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not the therapist here, but I got to do something.
Yeah.
But I thought that was just a fun. I don't know if you remember that day.
I remember. I called you. Was that the day I called you?
I think so. And I came over.
Yeah. And
yeah.
You came over.
Okay.
But with everything, it worked out. As I got older, going back to Joyce, she was able, because she was still a part of my life. She had turned into my nana, from my mom to my nana.
And that's how I knew her as Nana.
Nana. And so, she just stepped in and she goes, "This is my child. This was my child first," and she took me.
And I know that created
a lot of weird dynamics between the three of us, the three Aquariuses we were.
Oh, Lord. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, all three of us. It created weird dynamics with, you know, the going back and forth. And
but what did it say to you, though, as a child, you're being the focal point, with all those weird dynamics going on between the two of them? What did that say to you about you?
that I was loved.
That's the whole point. That's all it said. And I say to anyone, actually, I'm just finishing up my book about my experience both as a foster and adoptive parent and working with young people in the community who have been separated from their biological parents. And by the time you see this, it should be print and in publication. And it's entitled, It's Hard Work Being the Village That Raises a Child. And hard meaning both difficult as well as requiring a hard connection. And see, I see Nana as being the part of the village and your mom having a support, but I think it's how we communicate with one another. But it doesn't make any difference. If someone asks, would I do it again? As many tears as I've cried, as much as I do, but the bottom line, I know that my boys know that they were loved.
Yeah.
You know, and the oldest one is now 29. We don't talk very often, but one day, his son's mother, called him. And I was talking to him. I said, do you know who you're talking to? He said, yeah, this is my mom. And that just warmed my heart because he knows, and they know, and you know that somebody loved you. And even though someone may not love you in the way where it feels like love at the moment, you know that they'll loved you.
I remember, I don't know if I said it to you. I thought I said it to you. I said, I know she loves me. I just think she doesn't like me.
And you know, that is so accurate, though. And that's what I tell people. That you don't always like somebody, but you love them. So it's like, how do we get things back so we can like each other again?
But, our relationship was estranged, and it was when I found out that she had died. It was really hard for me because I was actually in therapy at the time dealing with me and her still relationship, and I was grown, and I had my own kids. I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was still dealing with me and her relationship and the issues with it. And when she died, of breast cancer.
Right.
Just the only thing a year and a half ago. The only thing I wanted to know was, did she get the pictures? Because that was a big thing. She felt like I left her out of my life. I left her out of my life with my kids and my new family and being married, and she just felt like I just kind of blocked her out. So I had like, okay. I went to therapy, and my therapist was like, well, send her some pictures, and everything. So I sent her the pictures, and I think it was you. Was it you who told me that she got them? And at that moment, I felt
relief.
She got the picture, so she got the message. She understood.
Oh, how much time do we have left? No time. Okay. We will continue this because actually I've spoken to two people, one a birth parent and the other an adoptee, who reunited with their families. That's something that happened with you. But the last thing I wanted to ask you, that you said that you felt, that you knew that you were loved. What would you say to a young person that might be being adopted at an older age and might be having some struggles in their adoptive family? What advice would you give them, or the adoptive parents?
I think the best thing that my foster mom, told me was, I think I don't know, I think I was 10 years old and I was crying, and I just told her, I said, I just want my mom. And she said, me too. She goes, I want to find her too. I want to know who she is too. And I think the best thing that you could do is not try to hide that part of their life, because that's a part of who they are, and that's going to be a part of, they're going to be seeking that forever until, they get closure. And I think the most important thing that both the parent and the child can do is just keep that an open topic, keep that an open conversation.
And validate those feelings.
Yeah.
Because a lot of adoptive parents adopt and want to forget like that because they want to be the only one. And it's not just about us.
Right.
It's about you and us and all
For
parts.
me, too, it was, I want to look like somebody. I want to know where I got my hair from. I want to know why my skin is light. I want to know why I have blonde hair.
Oh, I know we got to go, but two things you've got to tell. One, that you say you want to look like somebody. Tell what happened just before you got here today.
Seriously, just before I got here, I was at the library. I was printing out consent forms and all of that, and this guy walked up to me, and he was really trying to, pick up on me. And then he looked at me, and he goes, you look like someone I know. And I said, really, who? He goes, there's this teacher named Miss Russell. and you look like her. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, that's probably because that's my mom, my adoptive mom. And I said, well, did you know me, from Highland Elementary? Because she used to take me, to her class a lot. And he goes, no. He goes, she used to teach me at Vallejo Middle School, and I didn't even know her then. And so I said, you know what? It must be the hair, because she used to wear her hair curly and twisties like this. And it was just really weird, because it was about 15 minutes before I got here. And so we were talking about, that must just be her presence. And, go ahead and talk about this. I'm here. I'm watching you. Go ahead and do this.
And I do believe that her spirit and presence is there to egg us on. I miss her dearly. That was like my bestest friend and my sister. But I just appreciate that you allowed me to still be in your life, that you still call me auntie. And there's so much more with Dominic. The other story I want you to tell, though, is about your birthmark.
Oh, what about how
you were told to, I think you came up with the explanation of what it was.
Oh, that's where God kissed me.
Yeah.
And I still tell that to my kids. My kids have birthmarks, and I just tell them, I say, oh, that's just where God kissed you. And now that I know a lot of my biological family, my little sister has actually the same birthmark.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to definitely have to finish talking about this at some other time.
Okay.
And there were pictures that you brought, and the audience will be able to see. There's a picture of you with Nana and your birth mom.
My birth mom and me in the middle.
Right, that's awesome. And then pictures with you and your children.
Yeah.
And I think I can pull up a few more with you and Val and Dominic.
Yeah.
So this has been awesome. So my message to you is to continue to be the village. I want to thank you, Nana, for being there for Jackie through the difficult times, and I believe that you were there for Valerie as well. And what I want to say, when a child passes through your life, it's important that we stay connected. In my book, I talk about kids who I knew when they were 11, who are now like in their mid-30s. They're making me old. But that fact that we were able to keep that connection, because a lot of young people don't have that longevity of any relationships in their lives.
Yeah.
And one young man told me, you're the only person in my life that knew me when I was a kid. And it's like, wow. So that is what we can do as a village in raising our children. So I just want to thank you, Miss Jackie.
Okay, no problem.
And you will be back?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's a part 2 to
There's
this.
a part 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for joining us at Visions for a Child's Heart, and do something special for a child's heart. God bless.